Good morning, good evening, depending on where you're signing on from. Welcome to the joint seminar between IIPS and the Canon Institute for Global Studies. My name is Yuki Tatsumi. I'm a senior director at IIPS, just joined last August, and I'm very, very happy to host two fearless leaders on the two institutions, starting from and also, I must say, one of the two of the most respected strategic thinker when it comes to Indo-Pacific security issues and other strategic issues. Starting from our IIPS's own fearless leader, Honorable Randy Schriver. He's the chairman and CEO of the institution, and obviously he has served in many government positions in the past, including most recently Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific. And from the Canon Institute for Global Studies, which we hope to do more with over the coming year, we have Kunihiko Miyake. He is a special advisor and member of the board of the Canon Institute. And before then, he's also a retired diplomat. He spent many years covering Middle East, China, and also U.S.-Japan alliance issues. So I'm very excited to hear these both of their views. So the way it's going to start is I will pose them three opening questions, and then after that, I will open it up to question and answers. So if you would please use Q&A functions on the Zoom screen to pose your questions. That's the box that I will be monitoring. If you have any technical difficulties in terms of you can't hear any of us or anything, please try to reach out to the host using chat box. So those are the two different use for these two different boxes. So if you do pose question to chat box, it's most likely that I would not be able to look at those. So I won't be able to get to you. So with that, Kuni, Randy, welcome and good morning and good evening.
Thank you.
Let me start with you, Kuni, with the first question. So you wrote a little while ago in Japanese, in which you talked about how we may be witnessing the great power competition version 3.0. And actually, coincidentally, Wes Mitchell of Marathon Institute wrote very, very similar articles in English, which he contributed to foreign policy. So I'm very curious to know your views on so basically the main takeaway of your article for those of us who don't read Japanese. What was the gist of your argument about what we're witnessing in terms of a global strategic situation?
Well, first of all, good early morning, Randy and Yuki, and good late evening for the people, friends in Asia. I'm retired, as you may know, so I'm not interested in day-to-day issues anymore. So I read a book. It's entitled "The Future of the Great Games." That was written by an American scholar in Ohio, a younger guy, but he's really learning. He studied the sort of intellectual activities of the British Indian government before the independence of India. And they focused the geopolitical sort of rivalry on the Eurasian continent from India. It was almost 100 years ago. But what they studied and what their conclusions are just extraordinary. And I learned a lot from this book. So then I was inspired to reach a conclusion that probably we are now at the beginning of the Great Game Part 3, or Phase 3. The first one started in the 19th century between the British and Russian Empire. And then the British went down, the United States came in, and then they started the new phase two of the Great Game, which is we call the Cold War. And Russia or the Soviet Union was defeated. Then we thought that everything was over. But in the 1990s, things have started to change. Then unfortunately, the forgotten people are angry at the existing vested interest or political elites in Europe and the United States and Japan, and so that the political landscape, domestic political landscape has started to change. And also, the China is on the rise and the Russia is in decline. So probably my conclusion is that we are witnessing the beginning of a third phase of the Great Game between the United States and the Chinese Empire. So what I am concerned about is that with the beginning of this phase three, probably those 80 years of past stable, happy, predictable era under the free, open, and rule-based international order system is gone. Not forever. It's put on hold for a while at least. And then after the United States, the USSR is over, then forgotten people are angry and they produced the sort of a populistic movement in Europe and the United States and also in my country. But those beautiful days are so favorable to small nations like Europe or Japan, because we benefited a lot from that system. But unfortunately, the United States lost sort of a manufacturing capability, which would be needed for the long, long war. But unfortunately, if the third phase of the Great Game started, then probably the United States should do something different, because the United States can't sustain that kind of free and open rule-based international order anymore as well as before. Therefore, the United States has to focus on their own sort of a base, which is what they call Western Hemisphere. Then started to prepare itself for the new third phase of the Great Game vis-a-vis China. That's probably my wishful thinking. I may be wrong. So Randy, if I'm wrong, please let me know. But if my assumption is correct, then the allies like Japan or other European nations must decide whether we should go alone or without the United States, because we have to survive and things have changed. The new game will start, and we could be sort of not looked down upon, but not ignored, but probably we may be of less importance because they are focused on the Great Game. So that is what I been thinking these days, and I just wondered if Randy has something to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Kuni. So, like Kuni invited, I very much welcome your thoughts after hearing what Kuni said. But moreover, more recently, we here in the United States, we all saw the Trump administration coming out with a national security strategy in December. And shortly after, we just saw a national defense strategy came out a couple of weeks ago. And then right after that, Undersecretary of War for Policy, Bridge Colby, visited Korea and Japan with that new NDS. So can you share your general thoughts on all this? And especially, I think I would be very curious about your perspective on your reaction to the fact that the word Taiwan or peace and prosperity in across the Taiwan Strait is not mentioned once. because I know that's what Japanese audience and probably our friends in Taiwan all honed in on.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Good morning, Yuki. Good morning and good evening, Miyake-san. It's great to be with you. Just a few comments to react to Miyake-san's opening comments and Yuki's question. So I think we have called it a new Cold War with China at our institute. You could say third great game. I think both are appropriate. I think the difference is that we spent decades trying to engage China and build economic ties, people-to-people ties, and we're extremely integrated with respect to our economies, and our trade relationship has created these mutually dependent supply chains and mutually dependent economic relations. So what we're really grappling with is partly a military competition, partly a political diplomatic competition, but also the fact that we're so interdependent. To what degree do we untangle? To what degree do we, I guess the term of art these days is decouple or de-risk? And that's really quite unprecedented. When you mentioned the other two great games, we didn't have that sort of economic tie between the two great powers at the periods in history that you were mentioning. So it's an added degree of complexity that we're dealing with. So when you say countries making choices, we're all sort of bound to China for at a minimum, the near term, as we try to optimize a trade and economic relationship that continues to be beneficial, but also de-risks and reduces vulnerabilities and dependencies in key sectors and in key areas. So that's the only wrinkle I would add to your otherwise your excellent description of the state of affairs right now. In terms of Yuki's questions about NSS and NDS, I think the two documents have to be taken together, and the National Defense Strategy mentions repeatedly that it is a Defense Department, or what they say Department of War strategy that nests under the National Security Strategy and is support of the National Security Strategy. The reason I say that, Yuki, is because although the National Defense Strategy didn't mention Taiwan, and I do find that omission a little bit odd and certainly will create questions as it has. But the National Security Strategy mentions Taiwan quite a bit.
That's true.
And in fact, is more expansive than previous national security strategies and national defense strategies. It mentions Taiwan for not only its dominance in the semiconductor area, but its key geography. So I think if we take the two documents together, the National Defense Strategy would have to be read as being supportive of Taiwan maintaining its current status or better, because it certainly talks about the First Island chain and the need for deterrence. So I found it a strange omission. I think it seems to be a departure from not only the national security strategy, but if you recall, Secretary Hegseth's Shangri-La speech, a very strong statement in support of Taiwan and in support of our interests in the Indo-Pacific. So I think at this point, we take them together and we understand the administration's position on Taiwan with a little bit more clarity. Also, these documents don't exist in a vacuum. There are things that are happening day to day. And of course, one of the most significant developments of late related to Taiwan was the $11 billion congressional notification on arms sales. So the security assistance continues and the support for Taiwan in terms of the training, in terms of the trade framework that was recently worked out. So, I think too soon to tell in terms of the significance of the NDS and this Taiwan omission. But I'm a little more comfortable given the total picture when you look at NSS, when you look at other speeches, when you look at other actions. I think with respect to going forward, Bridge Colby's trip to the region, I think, continued a steady stream of engagement. President Trump visiting Asia at the end of last year and visiting Busan, where he had that meeting with Xi Jinping. And this all flows into this winter and springtime period where we hope to see a visit by Prime Minister Takaichi to Washington. We expect to see a visit of President Trump to Beijing. So all of these things will be defined with greater granularity as we go forward here, because that's when President Trump tends to make declaratory statements and in some cases joint statements that help define these relationships and help define their view of the region with a little bit more clarity and granularity, as I said.
Great. Thank you so much for your thoughts. This next question will be my last opening question to both of you. So for those of you in the audience, please do start taking advantage of the Q&A box and type in your questions if you have one. So thank you both for your thoughts. My last question to you is kind of since this is more that title of the event, this webinar is Global Strategic Trend 2026. I wonder if I could ask each of you the top 3 things that you personally would monitor and flag for all of us to watch when it comes to strategic development in the world. So I would start with you, Kuni-san, and then please do feel free to include any of your additional thoughts after hearing Randy's response.
I have a lot. I have a lot of questions.
Oh, I bet you do.
For Randy.
I bet you do.
Yes, because I try to be very honest and candid and sometimes maybe rude. But, there's so many people in Tokyo are still puzzled about what Mr. Trump has in mind. And I'm trying to explain, but I'm not an American and I'm not an expert on the Trump administration. So what I've been saying exactly is that, well, first of all, just what he says and what he does are different. They are 2 different things. So I focus on what he does or what his administration does. So no matter what he says in the morning and no matter what kind of change he makes in the evening on the same day, I like to focus on what he does. And then that is partly of my conclusion, is partly what I told you, but also Mr. Trump, regardless of what he is interested in, the people around him, people below him, my assumption, I may be wrong, must be try to be as responsible as possible as you were, as an assistant or deputy or whatever secretary in the ministry. So you want to be responsible for the national security of the United States. And no matter what your president says, you want to write down something you really want to say and you really want to implement at the end of the day. So that's why I'm very much encouraged that you said that the 2 strategies should be read, I'll put together so that there's not much difference between the previous ones. But having said that, the year 2000, was that 18 National Defense Security Strategy? I think the paper focused on China and Russia in parallel. And the 2022 strategy, as you might have been involved in, just focused on China very clearly. But this time, it's not always the case. But how can I explain to the Japanese public or Japanese scholars or ordinary people what Mr. Trump has in mind and how the others, the people around him, trying to maximize the national interest of the United States? That's my question.
Okay.
I hope I'm not too rude.
Okay.
No.
So do you want to go to that? And then maybe I'll come back to you, Kuni, about top 3?
Yes. if I may. Haha.
So yeah, I'll go quickly to Randy for your response then.
Sure. Well, I try not to climb into the brain of President Trump too often because I find it a confusing and chaotic place. And I think, those that try to put a coherent framework or consistent ideology around either his way of thinking or his activities, that's a pretty fraught endeavor. I will say, the reprioritization of the Western Hemisphere, I think, is really an extension of Homeland Security, which is always the number one priority in our national security documents, our national security strategies of the past, and national defense strategies. And so I think the way to think about that is Homeland Security for this administration means not only Golden Dome and protection of the homeland in the traditional sense, but immigration, border security, counter narcotics. For President Trump and his team, that's Homeland Security. So that's, I think, explains the focus in our documents, but also the recent activities in our own hemisphere. Not really in that sense, then supplanting the Indo-Pacific and the China challenge as a priority, but really an extension of Homeland Security, the number one priority. So the documents are very clear about the need to continue to uphold deterrence vis-a-vis China. The documents do talk about burden sharing, but they also talk about the importance of partnerships and alliances. The national security strategy is very clear on that. And in fact, it puts a timeline of sorts, which is very extensive. It says for as far as we can see, alliances and partnerships will be key to our ability to uphold deterrence and keep the free and open order open and through the first island chain and beyond. So I think the administration has a tendency to send out mixed signals and noise, because sometimes it's the mood of the day or the gut instinct of the day. But I think if you look at it over the expanse of a first term and now partway into a second term, you see a pretty consistent effort to deter China and to support allies and partners, with the expectation of greater burden sharing and allies and partners doing more for themselves. But again, I think the need to address the China challenge head on is a very clear priority across now an administration and a half.
Great, thank you, Kuni. I'm not sure if you're
Okay.
convinced or not, but
I am,
let me
yes.
go back to you for your top
The
three.
three topics or three issues. Number one, Randy, you were in Japan at the end of January, and at that time, the nobody knew what was going to happen. But as you may know, this week, I don't want to go into details but I speak English and I'm not speaking Japanese, and not to the Japanese audience. So I tell you exactly what I feel. Could be a landslide. It could be a landslide. They are talking about it, and of course it may snow, heavy snow on the ballot day. Therefore, you never know. But probably it is most likely that the LDP Ishin coalition will win. So I like to focus on the result of the next snap election, this snap election, that because this is not only about the specific policy or policy issues, but I think that could determine the course of Japan, at least in the foreseeable future. So I wrote about this just a few days ago for Japan Times. It hasn't been published yet, but what I said is that there are three possibilities. Number one is that there will be a new neo conservative coalition. Looser conservative coalition. It used to be LDP and Komeii or whatever, but now Komeii is gone, and then the LDP people don't have to worry about the Komeii elements at all. Then joined by Ishin, which is more conservative. Then probably if they win overwhelmingly, then other probably less conservative, but still conservative enough political parties might join or might have a partial, what they call coalition, so that there will be a second conservative coalition, which the first one was in 1955. So that could be a reality. That's one possibility. And the second possibility is totally the opposite. The center, moderate, liberal, mid-course sort of political parties get together to regain the political sort of center of gravity, so that they could even invite some more liberal portion of the LDP elements into their camp, so that there will be a more stable center left or center right sort of not completely conservative political movement. But it's may not be the case as far as I know. But of course, still, having said that, there's a danger that you never know. To be honest, I support the prime minister, but she has not been tested in the parliament yet. So she made a brave decision. It's a gamble to call a snap election, and she may be winning. But then the real political battle, will start right after the election. So that's what I'm a little bit worried about. And if she fails, then probably what I call a Knessetization of the Japanese parliament may resume. So now, even if we have a landslide conservative camp victory is foreseeable, but probably in the long run, it may be in chaos again. So these are the three possibilities I have in mind. That's number one. Number two, I'm worried about, I like to focus on the result of the midterm election in the United States. And probably you know better than I do, so I don't want to go into details. And the third, which I am inclined to talk about the PLA, the Chinese People's Liberation Army sort of purge. But probably you want to talk about it. So I like to focus on Iran. Everybody in this country, in my country, are focused on the result of the snap election. But you see, the Iranians could overreact, or there could be a misunderstanding, a strategic sort of miscalculation between the United States and Iran. I was based in Baghdad, and I know the area a little bit. And probably using force against Iran in this kind of chaos could be counterproductive. That could even strengthen the Islamic regime rather than weakening it. So I'm very much concerned about it. And the Israelis are not happy with the use of force at this particular moment, because they may not be able to defend or shoot down all the missiles, incoming missiles. And Gulf states are also concerned, because their oil facilities could be the Iranian targets. So I am very much interested and even concerned about the outcome of the negotiations, probably in Oman, between the United States and Iran. That's all three issues I like to focus on.
Great, thank you. Randy, you have a final word. Top three trend that you're watching out for.
Sure. Well, there'll be some overlap here for sure, and Kuni invited me to address a couple of these, which I'd planned to. So, number one, I think what's happening internally in China, and then how that affects their external behavior. The sacking and the investigation that's been opened on the highest-ranking military officer, General Zhou, is quite a remarkable development. in one sense, it's a continuation of the purges that have been underway for some time. It accelerated 3 years ago. So out of the 7 members of the Central Military Commission, 5 have been sacked or disappeared in some fashion. And in fact, it's actually quite a broad purge in the sense of 3- and 4-star general officers and admirals being let go or somehow charged or disappeared. But it's also a deep purge in that it goes into the services, it goes into combatant commands, and it's quite significant. There's debate among analysts as to the how to read this. Is this a sign that Xi Jinping is large and in charge and in power and can do this with impunity, and that what he's really demanding is results, and his corrupt and incompetent military is not delivering fast enough, particularly when it comes to Taiwan? Or is it a sign of paranoia and anxiety? And I tend to think it leans more toward the latter, that this is somebody who doesn't like the development of other centers of power, doesn't like people being in any kind of position to challenge him. I think there's a longstanding pattern among authoritarian figures where they have to purge and then purge the purgers, and no one is really to be trusted. I think there are signs of that. So this could be a very consequential year for the future of China. And of course, you think back to the Davidson window, 2027, we're sort of right on the cusp of that. So a really key year when it comes to developments inside China and then how that affects their external behavior. Number two, I'll go ahead and talk about U.S. politics and the midterm elections. From now, February to next November is forever in politics. But certainly the signs aren't good for the Republican Party and for President Trump when you look at various by-elections, special elections, and the like. And what we're seeing is pretty significant success for Democrats, including in local elections, state level elections, where President Trump carried districts by huge numbers. There was just a state election in Texas where President Trump carried the district by 17 points, where a Democrat won, not even by a little bit, by significant amount. So there's a lot of time between now and November, but it certainly looks like a Democrat wave is possible. And, for a long time, people were predicting, well, the House would likely swing Democrat, but just given the way the map looks, the Senate is pretty secure for Republicans. I don't think you can say that with a lot of confidence anymore when you start to see the results of these local and by-elections. There are Senate seats that will be in play that haven't been for quite some time. Texas, Alaska. These are seats that the Republicans will have to fight very hard to keep. Now, that's not just, this isn't just sort of interesting and politics as sports and judging the horse races. This has a lot of implications for President Trump and his second half of his second term. Is he going to be spending time and energy fighting off another impeachment? Is he going to be able to drive any kind of agenda? Will he have to resort even more to executive action, which is a little hard to fathom? But if he does that, that certainly invites a lot of challenges from the Congress and the courts. So we could be looking at a period of internally focused United States and a lot of domestic turmoil, which, again, given what we've been experiencing and living through, it's a little hard to imagine how it's going to get much worse, but it could. The third thing I will mention is, I think going back to Kuni's opening comments, when you think about great power competition and some of the key elements and aspects, I think the competition in the area of emerging technology is quite important. And I think 2026 will be a year where we will see whether or not distance is put between the United States and China, or China and the United States in certain key areas like artificial intelligence or the next gen of AGI, quantum, space, all these emerging areas when it comes to not only the foundational technology, but really, I think in 2026, the applications of this technology. So where we will see China and the United States surge in terms of unmanned and autonomous and semi-autonomous capabilities, where we will see the advanced capabilities that space can provide. And so I'm very interested in the technology competition, and again, not just in areas that people are quite focused on. We're quite focused on AI and semiconductors, advanced semiconductors, but this could really be a breakthrough year, excuse me, for quantum, for biotech, which is a very interesting emerging area. So that's something that maybe is a bit under the radar for some folks, but I think this is going to be a very consequential year.
Great. Thank you both. So as expected, questions have started to trickle in. So this kind of goes back to our earlier discussion, or your earlier discussion, about national defense strategy and national security strategy, how those two documents need to be read together. But then one thing that really stands out in these documents are they really kind of clarified the importance that the defense of first island chain has in these strategies. So this is the question for both of you. Do you both see allies and partners have a full buy-in into this strategy? And how can the U.S. Operationalize its alliances structure to fortify this goal, or enhance or support this goal of the first island chain defense? Does this actually end up giving the little bit more clearer position when it comes to Taiwan, despite the fact that defense strategy in of itself makes no mentioning of it? Like Randy, you said, NS and SS makes a tons of reference to it. So I think I should probably go to Miyake-san, kind of focused on the would ally have a buy-in to this, and then turn to Randy for the latter half of the question.
Buy-in in what do you mean?
It's like, do you think, I guess, countries like allies like Japan, South Korea, like, do they, are they good with the, I guess, emphasis that this administration
Yuki, do you think that the first island chain includes Taiwan?
I should ask Randy on that one. As Randy, a moderator, no comment.
Is the first island chain includes Taiwan?
Yes, it does.
There you go.
It's a big island, but it's an island, part of the island chain. So if that is included, then you don't have to mention that name. Do you? So that's the most encouraging part of the national defense strategy, as far as I'm concerned. So as you may know, we are probably, if the LDP coalition wins, then we will continue to significantly, hopefully, increase the defense budget. And today, NHK News was reporting the new ammunition depot construction in the remote area, and so things are going on. And of course, because we started from almost zero, it may take some time, but the progress is being made. I'm sure that the Japanese self-defense forces are now seriously focused on the deterrence capability increase development along the first island chain, of course, the Japanese parts. But having said that, as you may know, what Takaichi-san has said in the parliament is true. That she never said that she would defend Taiwan or she would defend first island chain anything. She said if some contingency happens, and if the United States is attacked, which is our ally, then we are, of course, ready to help our ally. in that kind of circumstances. So that's why I can tell my Chinese friends, if there are any, that okay, if you have no intention to attack the United States, you don't have to worry about the Japanese involvement because the U.S. should be attacked. That's a trigger to involve the Japanese armed forces.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that because there are so much misunderstanding out there about
Right.
what she meant, and I actually did have Japanese reporter actually asked me about what do you think about her comment that Japan is going to go defend Taiwan, and she never said that.
Right.
No,
Read her
not
statement.
at all.
But anyway,
Anyway,
Randy, back to you for the latter part
Sure.
of that question about first
Yeah.
island chain defense.
Yeah. So I think, the question about buy-in is in one sense, of course, they're bought in because our major partners and allies are part of the first island chain. We have allies like Japan and the Philippines and a ally-like relationship with Taiwan that are very invested in first island chain defense because it's their own security and their own sovereignty. But really, even beyond that, if you look at what is happening across our alliances and the networking that's happening either with the United States as part of minilateral arrangements or in some cases without the United States involvement, you're seeing greater connectivity and greater cooperation across countries in the first island chain. I think the best example of that is what's happening in the relationship between Tokyo and Manila, which is quite robust now. We've had a role in helping bring that together, but quite frankly, at this point, there's a lot that Japan and the Philippines are doing bilaterally that certainly would have our support and approval, but doesn't have our direct involvement. I think that's a statement that both see a contingency like Taiwan as being very dangerous for them, that they see cooperation across the alliances, in this case, Japan, Philippines cooperation as being beneficial to deterrence. I think this all speaks to a strategy that the United States has that focuses on burden sharing and focuses on alliance and partnerships, but that countries themselves are I guess the phrase you used in the question, have bought in because they're doing a number of these activities really at their own out of their own interests. I think the first island chain is a literal sort of geographic concept. I think it's not exclusive though to a greater Indo-Pacific strategy, which is also part of the administration's thinking, and certainly the Chinese are starting to push this and challenge this out beyond the first island chain. You'll note just this week the Chinese are celebrating the opening of an airstrip in Yap in the Federated States of Micronesia. So the deterrence of the first through the first island chain is a priority, but it's not at the exclusion of other interests that we need to keep an eye on and pursue in the greater Indo-Pacific.
Thank you. Actually, now that you mentioned Yap, um, which is like when I first knew this, Yap, where is it? But that is increasingly that area, second island chain and beyond. It has become increasingly strategically important for United States, but then also for Japan because Japan has a lot of stake in terms of economic assistance and SDG assistance with the Pacific Island countries. So, how do you think? Of course, First Island Chain, as clearly those strategies says, is a priority, but how can U.S. and Japan and like-minded partner, obviously in this case, natural partner is Australia and New Zealand to some extent, and they're both U.S. treaty allies. How does those relationship on that second island chain and beyond, South Pacific area should unfold or should look like, and what can U.S. and Japan each do to kind of safeguard that line?
Yeah, it's a great question. It requires a degree of coordination. In some cases, there's going to be a division of labor. because the United States has a special role, obviously, when it comes to the compact nations, the countries that have joined in compacts of free association. So that's Palau, Federated States of Micronesia, and the Republic of the Marshall Islands. We have interests and important relationships that extend beyond that, but the compacts really do put us in a position to provide for those countries' defense, and I mean that not only in the traditional sense, but in non-traditional areas like combating the effects of climate change, combating illegal fishing, transnational crime, etc. Australia typically focuses more on the South Pacific. So if you think of Micronesia, Melanesia, Polynesia, there's sort of a focus on the United States on Micronesia for the compact relationships. Australia, very strong in Melanesia, and typically New Zealand a little more in Polynesia, the southern parts of Oceania. So, I think in a sense we need all hands on deck. But if there's a traditional division of labor, we can't really afford any gaps. The Chinese are quite expansive in how they look at opportunities in the region. So in the instance we just mentioned, part of the Federated States of Micronesia, the island of Yap, putting an airstrip in, you'll see geographic proximity to Guam, which is quite concerning given our military buildup there. But it certainly hasn't been limited to that. In the south part of Oceania, in Polynesia, they've been active in places like Vanuatu with economic assistance, and in the Solomons, they've made tremendous gains when it comes to even a security arrangement that involves police and military training, and therefore access for the Chinese. So it's an all hands on deck endeavor, and I think Japan has historically been a very strong partner when it comes to development assistance and political support, and certainly can continue to play that role. And again, given the proximity of some of these islands to key areas in the Indo-Pacific, like proximity to Guam, all of that is of interest not only to the United States because it's our territory, but to Japan in order to keep the free and open order.
Kuni, your thoughts?
Well, just a short comment. China seems to be making a similar kind of mistake we made before the World War II, and the extending the supply line or trying to cover the entire Southern Pacific. It's easy to say, and maybe you can try, but it's so difficult to maintain. So and we tried so hard and failed. So China will probably repeat the same old mistake again, sooner or later, but maybe later than sooner.
Great, thank you. This actually question kind of nicely dovetails into the following two questions that I have. Next one up is a future of U.S.-Japan-South Korea trilateral partnership. So Bridge Colby's visit coincides with warming ties, especially between Japan and Tokyo and Seoul when it comes to defense. They two defense ministers had a ping pong, I guess, defense diplomacy, if you will, and then obviously Prime Minister Takaichi and President Lee seem to have a very good personal rapport for now. So how each of you see the prospect of a trilateral relationship? Because we were once at a place where things are kind of looking bleak and okay at best, but now are we really looking at fundamentally changed dynamics here? I'll start with you, Kuni-san, because I know you're usually cautiously optimistic.
Yes, I am more cautiously optimistic. Maybe 10 years ago, it might have been a dream and probably so difficult to attain. But maybe since a few years ago, I am changing my mind, especially after I visited Korea and I met with younger Korean generations. Of course, what we have done to the Korean Peninsula is a history, and they never forget, of course. We won't forget either. But the point is that um, the with the decades of democratic experience in South Korea and the uh, illusion, the people realizing that China dream is an illusion, and they their economy is not so good, so they're getting in more and more realistic. So put them all together. In my view, I am much more optimistic about the Japan-Korea-South Korea relations than 10 or 20 years ago. So maybe 20 years ago, when I was a National Security Office director, we tried to have a tripartite sort of a dialogue on national security affairs, but it didn't continue, and it was stopped. But recently, I think the environment is getting much better, so I am much more optimistic than before, and I'm sure that it may take some time, and there will be so many zigzags and ups and downs, but I think the South Koreans will make the right decision in the due course of time.
Oh my goodness. The entire time that I've known Kuni, this is like the most optimistic tone that I get.
I am very optimistic.
This is a watershed moment for me.
More optimistic than the Korean friends.
Wow, for the first time
Probably.
in like 30 years, this is the most optimistic that I've seen him talk about this relationship. Okay, back to you, Randy. Do you feel as optimistic?
Well, I do. President Lee in Korea has shown to be the ultimate pragmatist. He's defying gravity with the United States, a progressive government in Seoul and a Republican government in Washington, and they're getting along famously. But I think even his drum skills notwithstanding, I think his willingness to engage with Japan with a very supportive posture and open mind, I think is encouraging. I will say, even when there's political problems at top, I mean, the Biden administration rightfully gets credit for elevating the trilateral relationship, the spirit of Camp David. I think that was a significant breakthrough. But, even during the Trump administration, when there wasn't that leader level engagement, and even though there was a pretty severe political rhetoric and accusations, the Jisome was in jeopardy. There was incidents on the high seas that almost spiraled. We still had defense ties across the three parties, focused on very practical cooperation, missile defense, anti-submarine warfare, including all the way to defense secretaries, defense ministers. I never attended a Shangri-La or a ASEAN plus meeting where we didn't break out for a trilateral meeting at the minister level. So even when there's political tension, trilateral cooperation has really continued, at least over the span of several administrations in a row now. So I am optimistic, and I think we will continue to get help from North Korea, from China. I think our interests will really compel us to continue to cooperate with one another.
Yep.
Wow. This is like really, I'm still shocked to hear optimistic tone out of Kuni for this question. Anyway, moving on. As the national defense strategies and security strategy of the United States says, very much focuses very much on first line chain defense. So one could argue that when it comes to Indo-Pacific theater, maybe we're playing more defensive game than offensive game if you use the football. But as we both, as we all know, sometimes offense is the best defense. So in your view, do we have the right combination of defensive game versus offensive game at this point? Or are there any on the, offensive game part that U.S., Japan, and perhaps our like-minded partners and allies could be doing better on? I'll first start with you, Randy, and then if Kuni has additional thoughts.
Yeah. Well, this pretty quickly gets into a sensitive discussion about, is mainland China and targeting there off the table.
Mm.
And I tend to think there shouldn't be a China exception. We should hold at risk things that China values most. Doesn't mean that that's sort of the leading edge of your strategy or that you broadcast any kind of intent. But I think this notion that nothing on the mainland can ever be targeted or held at risk, I think is a mistake. But I do think, the perils of considering attacks on mainland China, a nuclear armed power that, is in many ways very resilient. They show themselves to be resilient even when attacked by their own regime in incidents like the Great Leap Forward and Great Cultural Revolution and all that. So this is a resilient society for sure. So I think, any kind of plan that involves offensive capabilities, should be done with eyes wide open. But I don't think there should be a China exception, and we should only be in a defensive posture. I think that sort of gives a defense in depth advantage to China that really is a competitive advantage in a theater like the Indo-Pacific.
Thank you. Kuni, your thought?
Well, we are a pacifist nation, and our defense posture is exclusively defensive, right?
Yes.
So, but I don't uh, want to use the metaphor of American football. I think that the battle would be more rugby than American
Ah,
football. So it shouldn't be completely defensive or offensive, but it's all around. You
it should
can
be more
offend.
fluid, is what you're saying. Okay.
Yes. So it's going to be a nasty game anyway.
And also, I believe one of the I think it was the defense strategy, national defense strategy that talks about flexible deterrence. So that kind of goes to your
That
rugby.
kind of.
That goes nicely with your rugby metaphor. Um, so thank you. I think ours quickly drawing to a close, but despite the fact that I heard the most optimistic prospect forecast
Hmm.
from Kuni on Japan-Korea relations, let me ask you kind of a sobering question to conclude the session. So far, for the economic reasons and others, Indo-Pacific seems to be, I guess, faring better in its relationship with the United States, particularly with this administration. It's kind of clear when the administration, we just saw the almost a meltdown of NATO not too long ago over Greenland. Um, is there any scenario that Indo-Pacific region could experience something similar to U.S. NATO partnership that we just saw in Greenland? So basically, rapid diplomatic tension over something that this administration feels hold dear as a part of the homeland defense. Um, I'll give you maybe I'm trying to think who should I go first? I think I will go to you, Kuni, first, and then um, give a last word to Randy.
Uh, two conflicting thoughts. One is if the United States consider Asia like in the same way as they see NATO, then the United States will cease to be a Pacific power, which she gained since the U.S.-Spanish War in 1898 or something. But by the same token, at the same time, some people were talking about pivot to Asia some time ago, and I don't disagree, but probably that's a wishful thinking, because I always see the United States cannot discard NATO, and the United States cannot forget the Middle East. And those three theaters, as I might have told you before, is becoming one theater of operation. Despite the fact that they are becoming one theater of operation, or because they're becoming one theater, then you cannot pivot to Asia. You have to always rebalance. And sometimes something happens in the Middle East, you have to focus on it and forget about Asia for a while, forget about the NATO for a while. So this is rebalancing, or I would say it's a whack-a-mole game. Okay, so if it's a whack-a-mole game, and then probably we could be treated as a NATO nation as well.
Thank you. Randy, last word.
Well, we should all approach questions like this with a degree of humility, since I think very few of us would have predicted threats against Greenland and Denmark and the 100% tariffs threatened against Canada, things of that nature. So there is always the possibility for kind of the unconventional norm-breaking approach to foreign policy that this president is known for. But having said that, what the strategic documents and other speeches and other statements and activities reveal, and by the way, we haven't mentioned the Congress. The Congress does have a say in things like this still, and so we should include the National Defense Authorization Act as part of this discussion, which is a very strong statement of support for Taiwan, for the Philippines, for the Indo-Pacific, and deterrence of China. But taken all together, you see a lot of language that reflects our strong interest in the Indo-Pacific, the economic ties, the future of our economies given technological developments, et cetera. So I don't really see the potential for a similar cleavage, and I think it's really sort of founded in not only the current state of play and where our interests lie, but really the trajectory. I think this administration sees Europe as sort of old Europe and of diminished importance. I don't agree with that, but I think that's how they see it. But they definitely see the Indo-Pacific as not only the present but the future. Not to mention the fact, are we an Atlantic country? Are we European focused country, or are we a Pacific country? And for my money, you look at Hawaii, the Aleutian Island chain, which runs deep into the western part of the Pacific. You look at Guam, for that matter, U.S. territory. We are firmly a Pacific nation, and our interests are only underscored by that.
Thank you both. And then this is a great way to end this webinar. Both of you had a lot of great insight to share with us this morning and this evening for you, Kuni-san, and for the audience who put in very thoughtful questions. I thank you also as well. So thank you for the early risers, for those of you who chime in in the United States, and thank you for those of you who tuned in from Asia/Japan, who stayed up late. So with that, I thank both of the speakers again for joining this morning. We hope to do this, not exactly regular, but as the things evolves, we hope to carry this conversation between these two strategic thinkers. And this concludes this webinar this morning. And you all have a great rest of the day or rest of your evening, depending on where you are.
Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Yuki. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Good night.